Hey guys, in this video, we're putting the Traxxas Xmaxx on the block. This should be a lot of fun. In this program, we ask 5 questions, we talk about it, and then we rate them at the end. Question 1, durability. Question 2, handling. Question 3, versatility. Question number 4, repairability. And question 5, overall value. What do you think? This should be a lot of fun.
Let's do this.
Check this out. All right, let's get straight into it. Rob, what do you got?
Well, we've got our 5 questions here. So I'm going to ask AJ here, what do you think about durability on the Traxxas Xmaxx?
Well, that's quite interesting, really, because everybody says it's such a tough truck, right?
Well, I've heard that.
And overall, it is a pretty tough vehicle, but right out of the bat, you know, right off the gate, when we got out and started playing with it, it didn't really take much to break it. And it does have some weak points in it, and one of the main weak points is these rear hub carriers that are inside the back here. Those are made out of a pretty shallow material. You know, they got a lot of vent holes in them and stuff, and that makes it weak. And we did test it when it was cool out, but then again, we ran it again when it was warm out, and there's still a problem. We probably broke 2 or 3 of those in the back. I wound up buying a bulk of them just so I could keep up with it before I actually did the upgrades. And even in the front here, we wound up swapping those out as well. So in the front, we wound up putting the aluminum ones up front here, and that gives us a little better control over things. So the C carrier on the outside is aluminum, okay? But on the inside here, we use the RPM hub carriers up front and in the back. We put the RPM ones in the back too, and that eliminated that problem. But to go with that, we also changed the arms over to RPM as well, because RPM has a tendency to flex more than break the way the factory ones here. I don't know what they're using for their plastic composites, but they could definitely use a little bit of an upgrade there. So changing those components out was one thing, but what I discovered shortly after that is if you're gonna switch to those components, they're more flexible, so you need the captured hinge pins to go with them. Also, we had a problem with one of the guys at the channel, Nate. He got really short shafted on this because we got out to the oval track, he made 1 lap, hit the brakes, it nosed over, he went to turn the corner and it cartwheeled. And it might have made 3 cartwheels and hit the ground, and it didn't hit all that hard, and I heard something break, and pretty soon he didn't have steering in it, and it shattered the servo saver mechanism with the bell cranks. It just shattered that equipment in there. I've heard of people having problems with like the steering servo and things like that. I haven't suffered any of those issues with this one. The speed control still holds up, the motor has no problems, and it runs pretty fair for a runtime being an 8S truck. It does pretty good that way. Overall, the rest of it, I did change the bumpers 1 time, front and rear, but it was really cold then, so shattering those was not a surprise. We did that actually on the maiden voyage for this, and we broke them pretty good on that one. So other than that, it's pretty tough. Like I said, we don't take them to skate parks and stuff, so we don't beat them into solid concrete the way some channels do. And if that's what you're into, awesome, do that. Just expect to buy parts when you do so. We like to run in nature, we like to run out in areas that, well, the average user could come across. That's what we kind of go for. So as far as durability goes, I'd say out of the box, it's middle of the road at best. Yep. You know, middle of the road, because it does have some weak points. I think they could have definitely built the parts a little better for the size of the truck.
Let's say it is a very large truck.
It is a large truck. I mean, look how big it is. I'm not standing way behind it. I'm like right at the tail of the truck here, and look how big this is, and I'm over 6 feet tall. This is an enormous vehicle, but for its size, it's not all that heavy. If you look over here, the Creighton 8S, which is a very big truck as well, and the Losi, those actually weigh more. The Losi's really a pain in the neck to drag around. I wound up starting to use a leash to pull it around when it's on the ground, and I got to thank you guys for that. You guys are the ones that pointed out that I don't have to carry it everywhere, so I started using a lanyard to pull it around. And that made a huge difference. It made pulling these cars back to the truck just that much easier, which made it way more enjoyable.
It kind of saves your arm a little bit.
It does. It's, you know, you can grab an 8 scale truck and pick it right up and just walk around with it. 10 scale, you could huck it in a backpack, you know what I'm saying? But these things are so big that there's a certain amount of weight that goes with them.
Yep.
Yep. What about question 2? What do you got?
Well, we got handling and control. What do you got on that?
Ooh, that's a good one. That's a good one. This truck has a pretty high center of gravity, but it also has pretty soft, look at how those tires move. Check this out. See how those move across? They're just real soft and supple, and they're real forgiving. So when you get into a corner situation, the tires will absorb some of it and the truck will roll. But you can run it up on 2 wheels and it handles that. It's really designed well as far as the counterbalance goes. When you tip it up, you can steer and keep it up on 2 wheels pretty good. It will burn off the extra power on the other side. The differentials do seem to work pretty well. And I haven't had any issues with the diffs in these. People have had diffs burn up and stuff. We'll get into that in a little bit. But what we have here for the overall, this handles really good. It doesn't turn super sharp, but look at the size of the tires. That's to be expected. And if you break into a corner and pin it, you can get it to come around, depending on your traction situation, of course. The truck overall, I'd say it handles pretty good. I haven't had too many issues with it. As long as you anticipate the larger turning radius, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah,
small areas, I don't think this does so well in small areas. But then again, this is one of the few rigs you can pretty much blast into a chain link fence and just do a backflip. I mean, not too many of them are capable of doing that. A small piece of plywood at the bottom just to get the nose up, pin it against the fence and land right on its wheels, and you're good to go again. I mean, it's a real stunning truck to play with. I don't think any of the other ones actually do everything this one does. It's got its own place, and there are people that are diehard Xmaxx fans, and I totally understand that. You know, I may have all these different brands, you know, here at the channel. We do whatever turns us on. You know, we may not have every car, but, you know, if it doesn't turn us on, we don't get it for the channel. And this one is definitely one that we enjoy having here at the channel. It's one that you like to run.
It's one of my favorites.
What do you think of it?
It's another one that I love. I mean, like you said, you can do anything with it. I love how it bashes. It just goes over everything. It's just such an animal. It is impressive.
Well, and just one other thing I'd forgotten is right down in here, there's the steerage linkage that goes from the bell cranks to the wheel arm, and that's, see if I can get you a view of that. Right down in here, I put the metal ones in, the aluminum ones, because I broke those twice. So as far as the durability side, I did have to replace those as well, but once I changed those out in the arms, I'm not afraid to run this into anything, and I watched you bash it straight into the cabin one day, and it was unaffected.
Yep.
It was really unaffected. We haven't geared it up. We haven't changed it. This is straight as it came out of the box as far as the running gear goes. And it's still working really good. The only complaint I have on that is the speed control tends to go into safety mode a little bit. So if you have a nasty cartwheel or you get moisture inside the rig, it'll feel like it drops to 75% power. Sometimes it doesn't seem like it has all the power it should have. That's the speed control. If you turn it off, turn it back on, you get 100% power again, but then it can go into safety mode again. And so that's really frustrating with their electronics, and I've noticed them having the same problem with the Max. And it's doing the same thing.
You think that's moisture doing that?
I don't know what's causing it. I know they don't have the world's greatest electronics in there, and I do have a Max 5 to put in it. And I may do that here pretty quick just to see if that solves the problem. But overall, when you put a fresh battery in it, it runs pretty good. What do we got next?
What do you think about versatility?
Oh, wow. This is a really versatile truck. It really is. There's no limitations pretty much as to where you can run it unless you're in a tiny space.
Yeah.
This does not handle well in a tiny space. An example, if I dropped it on the floor and tried to rip it around the studio, I would pile into something for sure.
Yeah.
And they do weigh quite a bit. So if you're in a situation where you've got a lot of really close tolerance or you have a lot of kids and dogs around and stuff, this can hurt things. I mean, it's got a lot of speed to it. This runs up around 40, 45 miles an hour, depending on how you have it geared. And that much weight, what's this, 26 to 28 pounds, I think, something like that. We haven't weighed it lately, but it does weigh quite a bit. And at speed, if you hit a small dog with this, that dog's gonna pay.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way around it. This thing is, if you're gonna run one, it takes a certain level of responsibility to run it.
Of course.
As far as versatility goes, with the size of the tires that it has on it, the way these they're so soft, they just absorb things. I can hit down trees with them and just hop them. And you've done this.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever we go out, this seems to be the one you grab first.
Well, it's like I said, it's an ultimate basher in my head right now.
Yeah, well, and they call it the king of the bashers, and not just a few people that call it that. You know, there, like I say, there's people that are dedicated Xmaxx fans, and thumbs up to you guys. This is a really good rig. That doesn't take anything away from the other ones that we run. Each one has its place. Nothing does everything the Xmaxx does except another Xmaxx. That's my view on it. This thing is exceptionally cool to play with. It's really rugged. We've never broken a chassis. We have tried. We run it off all the ramps. We're not shy about how we run it. So as far as versatility goes, it'll run on the track, it'll run in nature, it'll run off the ramps, it'll run on pavement, but it'll cartwheel a lot. So I'd say overall it's pretty versatile.
Well, with all the places you run it, I'm sure you've broke it. So what do you think about repairability on it?
Oh, repairability.
Is it easy, or?
You know, the first time you dig into it, it seems a little daunting. It does. When you first get into this thing, and let's get the body off here. When you first get the body off this thing and you see how they put this together, everything's pretty interconnected, and it does look pretty intricate,
yeah,
I guess, because things are hidden down inside the plastic. You know, when you get down in it this way, you have to get in it from the bottom to get to the drive lines and stuff, and there's a whole bunch involved in that. Just to change the gearing in it, you have to index the motor for the size pinion that you have and the ring gear that you put on it. I mean, there's a few tricks that you have to know, but once you get past that, this is really well designed in my opinion. I mean, it's basically built in thirds, so you've got your back end, your front end, and your main chassis. Okay, you can pull a few screws and take the whole top assembly out of it, and everything's laying right there.
What material is this, the chassis?
It's just plastic. I don't know what they use for the composite, but it's actually a pretty decent material that they use for the, I wish they used something at least this tough in the arms. My understanding is they have a different material in the arms, and maybe they're trying to make it more durable. But I don't know that that's working all that well. I think their answer is make the arms tougher. Well, the problem with that is these have plastic connector points everywhere. So when you're connecting the arms to the chassis, they connect into plastic areas. The tougher you make the arms, the more energy when you hit something is transferred into these plastic areas, and you can actually break chassis components and hinge pin points and all that stuff. And the problem is every time you put an upgrade on it, you add weight to the vehicle. Now you can counter that by running smaller batteries and lower the weight in the batteries, but that cuts into your runtime. This is big, right? It's not 5th scale. I think they call it 6th scale. Whatever scale they want to call this, it's big, right? So to push that amount of weight around, which is 25 plus, I mean 25 at the minimum, I think empty it's more than that. By the time you battery this thing up, you've got a lot of weight involved in that, and when you pile into something, if you make the arms too tough, it transfers all that energy into the hinge pins. Now you've got plastic components on the inside that can rupture. Now you got to take the whole front end apart. I want flexibility here. This is where the flexibility needs to be. It needs to be able to move instead of shattering these components up front here. It needs to be able to bend in the arms a little bit, and the RPM ones, which is what we upgraded it to, seem to do that really well. Some people don't like the RPM stuff. I'm not one of those people. I think the flexibility of those arms is paramount to having longevity with your vehicle. You need stuff on the exterior of the vehicle that will absorb. It's like changing the wing mounts on the Typhons. The Italians and the Creightons, we changed those wing mounts out to the flexible RPM ones because when you pile in on the wing, it'll transfer all that energy into the body, into the chassis itself, and it'll break the components that are in there. I've seen it done. And
now
we
you're just kind
launch.
of chasing their tail.
Yeah, and we launch quite a bit. Same thing applies. I've seen people put aluminum arms on here. That is a bad idea because now there's no place for that energy to go but to the hinge pin block. And that's where things come apart. And now you're not just changing an arm, now you have to change the whole front bulkhead to replace that broken plastic piece that you shattered on a component that should be strong enough to hold up to the vehicle. So that's kind of my take on that.
Well, with all that, what do you think about the overall value of it? Did you get what you paid for it?
Well, considering this was a present and I didn't actually have to pay for it, it was worth every penny. But knowing the price of these, if I ran this out on the road and it got run over by a dump truck, I'd buy another one. So I guess the answer to that is yes, I think it's worth the money. When you get one, just plan on having to upgrade a few things. The arms, the outdrive hubs, and the steering links here, those are a must. And like at the channel here, we generally upgrade durability, but we don't generally try and see just how fast we can make them go. It costs you tires. It costs nothing but money to upgrade that stuff. The more power you put in it, the more durability you have to have. So the tougher you make these components, the more weight you add, the more power you need, the more, you see how it's a kind of a cascade of spending money? These things are designed to be just right out of the box. They just didn't get the durability right in the right places, but that's something you can correct. So as far as that goes, for question 5 there, I'd say this is worth every penny.
Well,
what about you? You drive it around. What do you think of it?
I think it's plenty fast coming out of the box. You know, everything about this rig I tend to love.
I heard a nasty rumor.
What's that?
I heard you were going to get one.
I just told you that before this segment here. Is I finally get broke down, and I'm on my way to the store to get one after this.
Nice. I hope you get the green one, because if we both have orange, it's going to be awkward.
Yeah, we'll separate it somehow. Look for the one in the front.
Get the green one. I'll trade you.
Okay, well that rolls us into some questions from our viewers.
Oh,
Are you
viewer
ready for
questions.
these guys?
Cool. What do you got?
Well, one person asked, is it durable after upgrading? Is it still durable?
I think I understand the question. So, can you call it durability if you have to upgrade it?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. So, out of the box, I would say the durability on this is low. I really would. Just straight out of the box, because of the weakness in the hub carriers, because of the weakness in the arms, because of the weakness in the steering links here, I would say the durability is fairly low on that, because it takes almost nothing to break one. And we've taken these out and had simple rollovers and broke stuff. Okay, that being said, upgrading the parts that need it, which on this one aren't very many. Okay, upgrading the parts that require upgrading, now it's super durable. I'm not afraid to run it into stuff, which I would have been before. So out of the box, I would have to say it's not so durable, but with the minor upgrades, it becomes super durable. So I guess if you rate durability, you have to rate it separately.
Right.
You rate it out of the box, or you rate it updated. And that's what we're gonna rate here when we do our questions. We're gonna actually rate the update, not what came out of the box. We only rate out of the box during unboxing videos. We don't actually rate out of the box when we do these. Once the vehicle's been modified, it no longer gets the out of the box rating.
Right.
So yes, durability is durability, and it is 2 separate ratings.
Yep.
Yep, it is 2 separate ratings. What else you got?
Hey, another viewer asks is, how do you not break any gears? Mine broke after a few jumps.
Okay, so there's 2 things that that play a part in that. The first part of that is if you're not shimmed properly in your diffs, and with plastic components, you're always going to get variables. You always are. You really need to pull it apart and have a look at it. Now, when you spend X amount of dollars on a vehicle like this, to sit right down before you get to play with it and yank it apart to check it, that's just not right.
No.
You shouldn't have to do that. They should have quality control at the factory that says these are to tolerance, but they don't always seem to do that. Look, it's probably built by a guy named Bob that's got a weekend planned.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen, right? So that's one way that plays in. The other way is driving style. And that plays a big role. Nate and I have opposing driving styles. And if you guys watch the channel, you've seen Nate. We call him full pin because he likes to grip the throttle and just watch what happens. And until the car stops, he just watches. It's his thing. He knows it's hard on stuff. He doesn't mind the repairs, but it's thrilling to him, and he's not wrong for doing that.
No,
That's
it's
what turns
thrilling
him
to
on.
me to watch it.
If you can find something that turns you on that's not harmful, then you're not doing it wrong. You're making yourself happy within the hobby, and that's his style. But here's the problem. You get the inertia going on these tires, the motor spinning, the differentials turning, all that has kinetic energy, okay? So while that energy is spinning, it has a certain amount of power, okay? It's enough to throw this thing at 40, 45 miles an hour, just like that, right? You can just pin it and it stands up. So there's a lot of torque in that. So when you come off a ramp or you're in the air, okay, and you come down and you're still on the throttle,
The tires are
and
just
you hit
spinning.
and gain traction all of a sudden, it can't send all this power to the front to bleed it off. It can't do it that fast. There's too many weighted components in there that require spin up time. They just do. So what happens is it'll start burning out the gears in the rear diff, because that's where all the energy will go. It will put all of the strain right on the drivetrain through to the front differential and into the front tires. So when you come down off of any kind of air, when you get the ground, you have to be off the throttle so it can stop all that internal without trying to power into it and cause all that strain on the running gear. It's not designed to take that. It's only designed to take the amount of power that the motor itself can put out, plus or minus a certain amount for impact.
Yeah.
It's not designed to come off a 25-foot high jump and hit the ground, solid asphalt, full pin. It will just destroy the running gear. That's just how that works. So yeah, that's how that works out.
Yeah, and I had to learn that one too with my Typhoon. Remember, I blew up my rear end because then he watched me do it and he told me that's exactly what I did. Was I flipped it, I come around, I just laid right on the throttle. Those wheels were spinning full speed and hit the ground. And that was the end of that one.
Yeah, and that's really what it comes down to. If you're having trouble with constantly burning up cars, and you know, it happens to all of us. If you have trouble with burning up cars, look at your driving style first and see if you're really hard on it. When you pile on the brakes, for example, if you're running at full speed and pile on the brakes, this will endo, okay?
Yep.
Especially if you got any kind of traction. The problem is if you have that kind of traction, you lock the fronts up, all that energy, these are still trying to drive. So when you hit the brakes, it just shocks the system real quick and it'll flip the car. But it's not just that it locks the front, it has to go to the center differential. The center differential tries to bleed some of the power off to the back, but it can't do it really fast. It's got to work its way there. The oils in the differentials add a certain level of resistance. So when you really stab the brakes, look, it should handle that, right? Mm-hmm. But when you're coming down off a ramp under power, it's not designed for that, and it will eat up parts.
That makes sense.
Yeah. What else you got?
Okay, the next question is Xmaxx or Notorious Success?
Ooh, and we've run them both. Nate's got the Notorious, and we played with it, and it really, for me, it comes down to wheelbase. It does. The Xmaxx has a longer wheelbase. Yes, it's a bigger car, but it has a longer wheelbase, and it's a bit more stable. Mm-hmm. I guess a better comparison would be that and the Creighton. There's a good example because they're the same car. One's got a shorter wheelbase, a smaller chassis. Mm-hmm. Okay, the problem is, it's with anything. When you take a certain amount of weight, and just take a figure skater. The Olympics were just on, right? So you take a figure skater. When they spin with their arms out, they spin slow. Mm-hmm. But when they bring their arms in and get all that weight to the center, it spins fast. Yep. Okay, same thing applies to these. You try and backflip one of these, this has much bigger tires, so it puts more effort into it. But at the same time, it's spanned out over this distance. Take the same deal, and that's like the Creighton, same thing. When you shrink it down and bring that weight to the center, you might get 3 backflips on a really good jump with a Creighton. You'll easily pull 4 with a Notorious or an Outcast. The problem is when you get on the throttle from a dead start, the Notorious is standing right now. There's no control for steering. You're just running whatever it's going to do. And if you're into that, that's exactly what you want it to do. You want it to do wheelies all the time. You're not looking for speed. You're looking for stunt stuff. It's really well designed for that. It really is. But when you line up next to a Creighton and you want to race him around the track, you have almost no chance of winning because as soon as you throttle up, you don't have any steering because it lifts the weight. The Creighton's longer, so it keeps the weight on the ground better, and it has more control over that. And now, in order to get even better than that, those of us that are deep in the hobby are stretching ours, and we're calling them 7th scale Creighton XLs or whatever, and we have something cool in that demeanor coming up in the channel. But the idea is to put the Mojave chassis in it, the Mojave drivelines, the Mojave top brace, and that gives you a longer wheelbase, which means you can be harder on the throttle and keep the front wheels down. So it's not so stunty, but it's way more controllable. And when you're in the air, it doesn't rotate so fast you can't keep up with the flip count and get the brakes on at the right time to get it down and stop. With the longer one, it spins a little slower, so it's easier to time, so you can get it down on its wheels at the right time so you keep from destroying your car. But keep in mind, when you hit the ground, don't be on the throttle. Don't be on the brakes. Just let it coast through it. Once you're on the ground and everything normalizes, which takes an instant, then you can get on the throttle, do your wheelie, and take off. But never be on the throttle when you hit the ground.
So I guess the decision there would be, what are you into? Are you into stunt flipping and everything, or are you into between the Xmaxx and the
Oh yeah,
Notorious.
so that what it comes down to is it really does come down to, and thanks for bringing me back to that, it comes down to what you're into.
Yeah.
It really does. This
Two
does
different
wheelies
animals.
all day long. This thing does all kinds of stunt. It's fast, it controls good. The Notorious has basically one job. If I had to pick the two, I'd take this one.
Copy. Here's another one, Xmaxx or DBXLE 2.0.
Ooh, and that's a matter of what we're gonna do with it. It really does. The DBXLE 2.0 is a track car. Basically, it's designed for running fast and controllable. It jumps really well, but it's heavy. So really big air is hard on it, but we've launched that a lot and broke almost nothing. Just the center braces is all we've broken on that, and it takes a pounding. But that won't do half the stunts this will, and it weighs more.
Yeah.
So this one gets less time. The DBXLE gets less time on a battery pack than this does. This one's more entertaining overall. You can still race with it. You can still bash with it. Still, out of the two, if I had to pick one for all around, you can only keep one. I'd take this one. I would take this one because you can run it anywhere and it's light enough to move around.
I agree. I do think this one is just killer though as far as looks. And
Yeah. What else you got?
our last question from our viewer is any issues with the steering servo or tire foam?
You know, I've had no issues with the steering servo. That works pretty good, and part of that is driver style again. If you don't pile it into solid objects, you don't throw quite as much power against the servo. Now, there's also the electronic part of it. We did get a brand new fire team, that's this one. And within 2 battery packs, we just scorched the servo in it, right? And we didn't do anything wrong with it. We were just running it in the gravel in a parking lot, and it just fried the servo. And that is not a good thing. I've heard that people have had problems with the servo that comes in these. I've not experienced that. I have broken the bell cranks when Nate had his issue with the oval track. It wasn't his fault. It did shatter that. It was a real easy replacement. It didn't cost much. Those are super cheap parts. But we'd really punished it before that, so I think we actually fractured it and he just got stuck holding the bag. I really do. So as far as the servo goes, I haven't personally experienced any issues, so I can't speak to that point.
Do you think maybe it would be worth buying the same product and putting back in it, or actually upgrading when something like that breaks?
If it does break, I will look into an upgrade for it because I want faster. A little stronger would be good. This is still plenty powerful enough to do anything you need it to do, but quicker response is always better. It just always seems to be better. Add a little more power to it, but you're still driving the same servo saver. So if this one won't turn the wheels when it's parked on traction, odds are the more powerful one won't turn them either because it's the spring in the servo saver that makes that determination whether it'll turn it or not. So I would upgrade it, but if I had to, I'd put a stock one back in it because I've been running it all this time. We've had it well over a year. We run this one all the time, and we still have the stock servo in it. As far as the tire foam goes, I have had an issue with the tire foam though.
Yeah.
And what it comes down to is we had the initial set of tires, we did not vent them. And once you get moisture inside there, because they weep in from the inside of the wheels, there's vent holes in the wheels and you get some snow in there, the water gets into the casing and there's no way for it to get out. It can evaporate, it doesn't come through those little holes, it just stays in there forever. And what it did was that moisture over time broke down the foam. And you can grab those tires and you can't feel anything in there. They're just basically a casing on a wheel. Once we started venting them, and it can shed the water when you spin it, you tape off the inside, vent the outside holes, and that's what Arma's doing from the factory now. They listen. We're able to shed that water. Once you wash your car, get it all cleaned up, sit and hold the throttle till it stops spraying water out of the tires. We haven't had a tire foam problem since. So we've ruptured tires, but that's a different subject. As far as the tire foam goes, I really think that's a matter of venting.
Yep.
Yep. Does that about cover it?
I think that covers everything. I think we're down to our questions of rating of the vehicle.
Okay, so there's our discussion on it, guys. Now we're going to sidestep for just a short period of time and we're going to go ahead and answer the questions as far as 1 to 10 for each of the 5 categories. A total of 10 is possible for each one. Then we're going to give you our total and the overall rating for the truck. Check this out. Okay guys, it's time. Rob?
Well, we got our 5 questions here, and the first one is durability. Andy, what did you
Well,
rate durability at?
Let's have you answer these first. You good with that?
I'm good with that.
Okay, go ahead and you give your answer first, and I'll give mine.
So this is AJ's rig actually, and he's let me drive it quite often.
He really likes this one.
Actually, on my way to the store to buy one myself. So with me driving it and watching him drive, I rated this as a 7 right out of the box. I do think it needs some upgrades with the hubs and stuff we were talking about. It would have been a different rating after the upgrades, but that's what I gave it.
Nice.
How about you?
Well, I kind of tried to weigh it out between the two. What it was out of the box was kind of low, but what it is now is really high. So I went ahead and I gave it 8 out of 10 for durability, because there had to be middle ground in there. Some people might do one of the upgrades, some might do a couple of them. If you do all 3 upgrades, like I recommend in this thing, it really does become a beast of a truck, but I think 8 is a fair score for it.
Okay. Our second question is handling and control.
Yeah.
And I give this an 8.
Really?
For as big of a rig as it is, I really think it handles well. Now you have to have an area to run this, because it is a big rig.
Yes, I agree.
But as far as controlling and everything, I thought it did very well.
Nice. Believe it or not, I'm going to marry up to that. I give it an 8 as well, because for the size of the rig, the high center of gravity that it has, for the ground clearance that it has, the design of the truck, the fact that you can, with some practice, you can run it on 2 wheels, on the side wheels and stuff, and it does take a trick to do that, and I'm not really super good at it yet, but you can do it. And so for me, yeah, 8.
Awesome. Versatility.
Oh, versatility.
I gave it a 9. I almost gave it a 10, but it didn't go through the cabin. So there was one thing that stopped it.
The cabin. Well, it's not fair when you hit a building, okay? But yeah, that's a fair score. It is a pretty versatile truck. It'll go anywhere from the track to the trees.
Yep.
It'll run it all, and for that reason, as far as that goes, I gave it 10, because this one, if you're gonna go run just about anywhere, unless you have like really constrictive area, if you're gonna go run just about anywhere, you can take this and have a blast doing it. So I gave it 10.
Agreed. Okay, repairability, ease of repair. Now this is where it gets kind of tricky for me. Like I said, this is AJ's rig, so I've been there when he's worked on it, and I haven't actually physically worked on it a whole lot myself. So with just watching him and being around and doing it, I scored it as an 8. What do you think of that?
That's fair. Well, if you're not actually the one turning the wrenches, things can seem a lot harder than they are. They can, because you don't understand why something's being done. The best teacher for that is to actually be the one doing it and struggle through it yourself the first time, because it'll be confusing. They all are. It's not this car in particular. They all are. Once you've had it apart and you've put it back together, and that's the joy of buying a kit and doing the assembly. So when you buy a kit and you assemble it, you know how things are put together. So repairability is way higher, because it's easier for you to get into it, because you have the reference to go back in. When you get an RTR like this one, you don't have that reference the first time. And since you haven't actually been the one that changed all the parts on it, I understand your score. But for me, this is really well made as far as how they design it. Everything you can get to pretty easily, everything connects real easily. I give it 9 out of 10 for repairability, because they really did think things through. I don't like necessarily the materials they use in some of their components, but the overall design of the rig, really good, 9 out of 10.
Okay, well the next one is overall value.
Ooh.
And like I said, I'm on my way to go buy one myself after running Andy, so I'm thinking it's an 8 for me for overall value. I know what I'm getting because I've been running his, and I know that I'm gonna upgrade some parts right off the bat. Other than that, it's a very tough, fun vehicle, so it should rate high.
I understand that. However, for me, that didn't make a whole lot of sense, because you're excited enough to want to go buy one. So is it worth the money? Yes.
Yeah.
Because you're going to go buy one. Okay. That makes a certain amount of sense. For me, the thrill of running this, okay, the look on everyone's face when you dig something this size out of the truck and throw it on the ground, and we don't set these down gently. You guys have seen us do this. We huck these down. If they can't take dropping from the truck, they're not going to take a launch from a ramp, right? So for me, this one definitely it's definitely worth the money because the joy you get from this one, and that, of course, again, that doesn't take anything away from what's behind me. Every girl has her charms, as you say. Each car has its thing. There's something about each one that thrills you, and there's nothing wrong with that. In this thing's class, which is kind of a class of its own, the value of this truck, knowing what you're gonna have to replace, which is not all that expensive, even with changing the arms and changing this and changing that, I'm still less than $200 in upgrades. Less than $200 in upgrades. I did have to buy tires and wheels, but that's before I learned how not to pop them. And there's a pretty simple way not to do that. If you're on your side, don't pull the trigger and try to get it to right itself. It'll overspin the top side tire and it'll shed it every time. It'll overspin and blow the tire. Once you learn that, I haven't lost a tire since. And so for me, value, overall value for the rig, even with, I'm not a great fan of the radio, but it does work good. I'm gonna give it 9 out of 10 for value.
Yeah.
Yep. So there you go. That's the 5 questions. What we come down to is my total was 45. Rob's total came out to 40. Not bad, not bad. So that gives an overall rating for this vehicle from 1 to 50. It gives it 42.5 points out of 50 for the Xmaxx. You know, this one still today, over a year later, is number 3 in our collection. And that says a little something. The Mojave's one up from this one, and the one at the top of the pile is this monster here. And that one is just fun to see run too. But this one, top 3 for the channel. So hey guys, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. It's awesome when you do. And don't forget that notification bell to stay informed of upcoming videos like this one. You know, we really enjoy doing this kind of stuff, and it's fun to share what we've learned about the vehicles that we have in the studio. You know, if you guys have one of these things and you've had issues or things that you really love about it, please feel free to leave it in the comments down below and help others along the way. Hey guys, I'm AJ. This is Rob for AJ Jam Studios saying, keep bashing, guys.